The open housing campaign of 1967 and 1968 plays a similarly catalytic role in helping spur passage of the third and often forgotten Civil Rights Act of the 1960s, and that's the Fair Housing Act. So Milwaukee and the work of Father Grappi, the Youth Council, and the Commandos deserve its place in our national narrative of racial change, and it hasn't gotten its place in that national narrative, which then leads us to ask the question of why hasn't it gotten its place in that national narrative, and why in general hasn't the Northern movement gotten its place in our national narrative and telling of the civil rights era and the struggle for racial justice. And in part, I would answer that by saying that we continue to have an urban crisis, an ongoing urban crisis 50 or 60 years later. And by looking at the story of Milwaukee, by looking at the story of Cleveland or Boston, these northern urban movement stories, it compels a confrontation with the present and the unresolved issues of that era that still plague our society today in ways that are known to Black communities because many people are still living in those circumstances, but which many white people have had the privilege of avoiding. Historical stories teach us things about the past, but more importantly about our present moment. We're asking questions of the past to try to make sense of our present and think about how we might go forward. I think a lot of people don't want to hear these stories, this story in particular in Milwaukee and beyond, because it compels this interaction with the present that's hard and difficult, and then it would mandate or demand from us that we do something about it. And so if we can just kind of keep these in the closet and not tell the stories like of the open housing campaign, we can kind of continue to live in our ignorance, which then does not demand of us something. And we can craft other kinds of narratives, often based on stereotypes about Blackness, long-held ones, right, that let us off the hook as a community for the structural and systemic and historical dynamics of the inequality that we still face today. So I think this is really important. So there's a reason why people don't do it, but that's exactly why, as a historian and a teacher, I do this, and why I chose to write about Milwaukee, and why I think it's so important, and why I continue to do work on the movement more broadly in the urban North, is precisely because we need these stories. We have to remember as the first step to overcoming the persistent and ongoing inequalities today. So while some people want to look away, I would say it's crucial and important for us to stare into that abyss.